All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thank you for letting me know that Frank Sinatra was breaking up. That's pretty sad. Our wedding, we had lots of Frank Sinatra and other nice music, and that really elevated the mood. So next time, I guess we'll just have to find another way to make the sound more clear and crisp. Again, my name is Terry Parham, one of the presenters for tonight's presentation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Wednesday to be here with us at IWB headquarters to talk about just financial topics and concepts that we hope will be helpful as you continue that path towards abundance and towards financial independence. I'm going to kick off the presentation. I'll just give the first few slides to introduce us, and then I'll pass it over to my much better half, Kennah, and then she'll take us through the beginning. We're going to switch a couple times. You'll get me, Kennah, me again, Kennah, and then I'll finish up the presentation. If you have questions, we have the chat box up on the screen. We'll do our best to address your questions, and our plan is to leave at least 10 to 15 minutes at the end to be able to have question and answer where we can talk about anything that's on your mind. So we're going to do our best to be good, be quick, and be gone. So we'll just jump right in from here. We wanted to just put up a quick slide for those of you who don't know us professionally. Our firm is called Innovative Wealth Building. There's 4 planners, myself, Kennah, Jennifer, and Warren, together, decades of experience helping hundreds, if not thousands of clients collectively. And we're a registered investment advisory firm. So short for that is RIA. It means that we have the highest level of scrutiny in the industry. We legally have to act as a fiduciary and do what's in your best interest. We want to sleep well at night, so we just act in a way that allows us to always do what's right so that we don't have to think twice and we can know that we're taking care of folks the right way. So again, thank you for being with us tonight. Behind both my name and Kennah's name, or I guess to the side, you'll see CFP, CHFC, CLU, that's Certified Financial Planner, etc., etc. Just means we're super nerdy, and hopefully that makes us really prepared for your questions and to deliver information that will be impactful as we roll through today's presentation. In addition to certifications, our whole team is licensed in several ways. We have Series 6, 63, 7, 24. Long story short, we have all of the capabilities to help people exactly where they are to get to where they want to be. So again, on behalf of myself, our planning staff, every single member of our team, our clients who are phenomenal, our friends and family, thank you so much, and we're going to get ready to get started. Here's my last slide, and then I'm going to pass it over to Kennah, who's also, of course, one of our founders, our Chief Technology Officer, graduated college at 19 years old, and high school at 17 because she's an overachiever. She wanted me to tell you all that we have a son, Everett. On the left, you'll see him. He's almost 1.5. He's also the mascot for the company. So Everett and Ellie are the 2 little ones. We love talking about money, not for the sake of spending it, but for the sake of helping people utilize money as a resource to get them to where they want to be. And we both like tacos. We recently flew to Texas. Our first demand off the flight was to go to our favorite place, Velvet Taco. If you've never been, I would strongly suggest it. Not just travel to Texas for the tacos, but at least stay for the tacos. Maybe a margarita or a sparkling cider, whatever's your fancy. So I'm going to pass it over to Kennah. Before I do so, could someone just give me one last reality check to let me know that the sound and everything is okay? I don't want to leave it and have it not work and then have Kennah come and pinch me. All right, good to go. Thank you so much. I'm going to just go ahead to the opening slide. I'll turn off the video for just a moment. We'll do a quick outfit change and you'll see someone else. And if you hear little squeaks in the background, that's our son, Everett. He's interning with us tonight. So he's furiously taking notes in the background. So just one moment, you'll see Kennah and you'll maybe hear Everett for about a second.
All right, thank you, Terry, for introducing me. It's great to join you all on our second webinar. I know Terry obviously did the first, So I was happy to jump on. He's definitely a much better presenter than me. So I'll just preface it with that. He is definitely funnier, has goofier jokes. I'm a little bit more of the serious one when it comes to my career, but I'm definitely goofier in person outside of work. So I'll jump right in. Today's game plan is really to talk about obviously the financial independence puzzle. We're definitely going to go over a lot of different topics and we're going to touch on each of them. We're not going to go into too much of depth because we will be here for hours and hours if we do that. But the main game plan today is to talk about cash flow and balance sheet. We'll cover investing, talk about goal setting. We'll go over the various protection strategies that are involved in everyday life and what the challenges that we face when it comes to those. We'll touch on government benefits, and then we'll go over estate planning and taxes and touch on Social Security as well. So I'll go ahead and get started. So we'll get started with cash flow and balance sheet. We think that this is important because when it comes to taking a look at your finances and taking a hold of your financial life and planning for the future, it's important to think about your situation when it comes to running a business. So what is a cash flow statement? That's a question a lot of people will ask. It's to be simplified, it's really just your monthly, or if you do your budget in an annual way, a monthly or annual budget. It really comes down to the cash inflow versus cash outflow. So that's pretty much the place we want people to start when it comes to planning for their future, thinking about retirement, thinking about long-term or short-term goals, is take a look at your cash flow statement. If you haven't done that before, it's something important to think about. And just in a very simplified way, what are your cash inflows and what are your cash outflows, and what's the result of those? And that will help you get a starting point and build your foundation towards some of the goals that you may have. A balance sheet is also important as well. It's really just a breakdown of your assets and your liabilities, taking a look at both of those, and then reflecting out, getting the net worth out of both of those as well. A lot of times we ask people that we work with on a day-to-day basis, do you know what your net worth is? And a lot of times people, they know that they have 401ks or IRAs, or they have other different savings accounts or other different investments, but they've never actually added up all of their assets and taken a look at all of their liabilities, and they've never actually saw their net worth before and been like, wow, that's actually crazy how much they've built and accumulated over the years. So that's something that we definitely would encourage a lot of people to do, is when you start out, taking a look at your assets, taking a look at your liabilities, and it'll tell you a lot about your starting point, and it'll help you start to build out some goals for the future to see how realistic some of those goals are long term. So when it comes to knowing your balance sheet, like I mentioned prior, it really empowers you to accomplish your goals. It helps you outline them a little bit more clear. It really, for some people, it's paying off student loan debt, so it's gaining a plan to pay it off sooner. For other people, simplified. I just work with my brother who's a musician, and he has a very simple financial plan, but for him, it's really getting his emergency fund to the right number and then being able to take the additional money that he saves and put it towards investments, like a solo 401k or a regular 401k, or even just starting a Roth IRA. So it really can be simplified goals. But I think overall, a balance sheet tells you a lot about your situation and gives you a clear path to moving forward, how you can make your situation better. It also shows you what you own and what you owe. A lot of people have credit card debt, or they have, different student loans from different institutions, and they don't know the interest rate. They don't know, when the loan's going to be paid off, or if they're going to pay it for 20 or 30 years. So taking a look at a clear picture of your liabilities, a clear picture of your assets, really helps you understand what you have. And then that way, moving forward, you can really overall start to increase and change your net worth over the years, because really your total net worth is really equivalent to just overall long-term financial freedom. And that's what we like to tell people, is when it comes to building your net worth, that's building your ability to have more financial freedom long-term, to achieve your goals sooner, and to retire earlier if that's something that's important to you. So that really takes care of the balance sheet. Like I said earlier, running your finances like a business is a good mindset, I think, to have. Number one, it helps you know your numbers. It helps you stay on top of them. It helps you reduce spending. So having a budget, obviously having a budget can be difficult because it's not the same every single month. It's always changing, but you can find areas to reduce spending in certain parts of your budget. It also helps you establish SMART goals, which is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So goals that actually make sense for you, not just goals that you read Google on the internet or that goals of your friend, but goals that actually make sense for you personally. Also helps you maximize your investments. So taking a look at 401ks, Terry's going to touch a lot on how to invest, what the different types of investments are out there, investments that are in your 401k, how to invest in an IRA. He'll touch on all of those in a little bit. And then I think that the tying it all together is just monitoring and making adjustments long term. That's probably one of the most important things in the 5 steps, because a lot of people will start a plan, or some people will start a plan, and they may have some really good intentions, they have great goals, they're on a good path, but they may never look at their situation again for 5 or 10 years and make adjustments. And by making small adjustments year after year, you really see the benefit and you really see the ability to maximize your situation and to honestly allow you to retire much sooner. So I would say that's probably one of the most important steps, is monitoring your situation long term and making the adjustments. Where's all my money going? Making a budget is obviously something that people actually more often than not struggle with, especially if they're working with their significant other on it and they have different viewpoints and different preferences on how that person spends money or how that person saves money. This is an example of a digital budget. I think it's important to go through. This really does create the foundation of your overall financial plan, your overall goal strategy when it comes to saving money, investing for the future. And it really just gives you a good picture on where you can save money. We one time had a client who was paying $350 a month for their cable. And unfortunately, they didn't realize it until they actually sat down, did a budget, went through it, and then they called the cable company, made some adjustments, and they were able to save $200 by just decreasing their cable bill down. So I think long term, creating a budget and doing one maybe not every month, but maybe every 6 months or maybe 3 or 4 times a year, just to see where you are and how you can make some adjustments long term. Budgeting made easy. This is just kind of a simplified breakdown on how to think about a budget. It's really just the needs versus the wants. And in most categories, the needs are pretty fixed. Mortgage, rent, food, utilities, healthcare, insurance. Those aren't really expenses that people see go up and down and fluctuate on a monthly basis. The variable expenses are the wants. So for me, it's going on Amazon, buying random things, shopping online. Those are areas I obviously can cut down on. Home improvements, one, dining out. So if you feel like things are tight or more tight than normal, those are definitely areas that we can help people decrease their spending, put more of the dollars towards debt, or put it towards a goal that they're trying to save towards, or something like their emergency fund. And long term, they will see the difference in their situation. So I'm going to let Terry jump into investing. He's going to go over investing 101, give you a bunch of examples, and then I'll jump back in and start off on protection strategies. So I'm going to go get my child and let him jump on the screen.
All right. Sorry about that. I had to chase a little person, and his legs move faster than mine, apparently. So we'll pick up here and talk about investing. And I'm also just going to pull up the chat box, see if we had any questions. So, yep, doesn't look like we had any questions so far. So we'll keep rolling along. So investing is an important topic for a lot of reasons. As you see in the picture, it allows you to take something small and then build it into something bigger. And people ask me all the time, why is it important to invest? You'll find that I love to Google things, not because I don't have an opinion, but because Google, Wikipedia, these things exist for a reason. So if you look back the last 30 years, the stock market has had almost an 11% return. So if you just put your money in the stock market, left it alone for 30 years, you earned a compounding interest return of 11%. Compounding just means not only does your initial money grow, but your interest grows. So it just builds and builds and builds. What's the big deal? Well, here it is. If you had $10,000 and you invested it, 8.3% is the net after inflation number, but that close to 11% was the before inflation number. If you took that 10,000 and let it grow for 30 years, you'd actually have about $246,000. Now, from 10,000 to 245,000, not too bad. You've multiplied your money by 24. Probably didn't happen in a bank account. But what if we were crazy enough, in addition to that $10,000, to put away $10 a day? So $10 a day, 300 bucks a month. We do that for 30 years. Instead of $250,000, we end up with $1,000,000. So this is a slide that I show to people who are new in their career. They don't have to be 21 or 22. Let's say they're 30 or 35. I think most people can probably find a way to save 10 bucks a day. If not, start at $5. I don't care where you start, but when I speak to people nowadays, if they have goals that are real financially, I tell them they should expect to become a millionaire someday. Not for the sake of just having $1,000,000, but because nowadays things are so expensive. I saw gas for almost $6 a gallon in California. Once I woke back up from hitting my head on the ground and passing out, I reluctantly filled up my car, and it cost half my 401k. But again, things are going up in cost. We want to make sure our money is growing to keep up with that and then outpace that trend. So again, cost of living, the cost of everything. I went to Starbucks this morning. Can anybody guess? My wife and I, our son is only 1.5. Can anyone guess how much we spent at Starbucks on just a simple order? So one coffee, couple sandwiches, some little egg bites. Any guess what that cost at Starbucks? Emily obviously goes to Starbucks. It was close to 25 bucks. So thank you, Emily. Yeah, it's crazy. And the materials for that was probably $4. So you're paying $21 for the experience. So again, I'm advocating for people to save an extra 10 bucks a day. Well, I just blew it for 2.5 days because I needed egg bites. So that's the general cost of living going up on average 3% or so. College education cost goes up on average about 5% a year. Healthcare goes up on average 5% a year. If you're keeping track of Medicare, you know that next year the price is going up 14%. Spoiler alert, that's not 5%, which is insane. So things are getting more expensive. So that's why we want your money growing to keep up with that rising tide. So insert the plant-based protein. My family knows that I like this stuff. I like to feed fake meat to unsuspecting people just to see what happens. I see someone says good stuff. I think I know who that is. I know that last name in the chat box. So yeah, we're not going to talk about Beyond Meat, but at this juncture, I'd usually talk about stocks and bonds and things of that nature. But we're going to go beyond. Let's go beyond that first level, and let's take it to level 201. And yep, I knew it was you, Dave and Deb. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you like the Beyond Meat stuff. Once they get the fat down a little more, I'm really on that track. So what I wanted to talk about today was MFs and ETFs. Not those MFs, but mutual funds. Most of us know and love mutual funds. We've probably used them for 30 years. But you'd be surprised to hear that people I talk to, they admit to me they couldn't point out a mutual fund on the street if they saw one. So let's take a moment. We'll talk about what a mutual fund is. In my most simple example, a mutual fund is a bucket where you drop in a whole bunch of stocks and bonds. So you get a bucket, you put in tens to hundreds of stocks and bonds, and there's your mutual fund. In the past, mutual funds were almost always actively managed. What that means is you go hire 30 smart people, you let them argue in a room, and they decide what companies to buy and sell. No, let's not buy McDonald's. Yes, let's sell Coca-Cola. And that's how mutual fund investing used to work. Then enters this company called Vanguard and all sorts of other companies. And now there's this thing called passive investing, where instead of just having 10 or 20 or 100 stocks and bonds, you can have 500. You can have 1,000 all in one place and at a cost that's 90% less. So again, a mutual fund is just a bucket full of stocks and bonds. It's either managed by a team of professionals or it's unmanaged. Here's the dirty secret. The average fund manager doesn't outperform the bucket that has no supervision. The index bucket actually does quite well. So nowadays, more and more people are starting to use index funds and then also ETFs. So we've defined mutual funds. Now, ETFs are a bit of a mystery. Often I'll ask someone, do you know what an ETF is? And what I hear is, oh, it's an electronic fund transfer. Close, that's an EFT. An ETF is an exchange traded fund. If a mutual fund is a bucket, an ETF is the same thing. The makeup is almost the exact same. However, there's lots of feuding and fighting between ETFs and mutual funds for dominance because there are some differences. But all of us, we're looking at these two red buckets and we're thinking, WTF? What WTF meaning why the feud? They look so similar. And in fact, if you look at a Vanguard S&P 500 ETF and a Vanguard S&P 500 mutual fund, S&P just means Standard & Poor's. It's 500 US companies in one bucket. They have the exact same stuff. They have Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Tesla, NVIDIA, which is a company that does artificial intelligence. They're the exact same. So once again, what's the difference? Where's the feud? Well, ETFs, by definition, have some advantages. So the first thing is ETFs trade like stocks. When you have a mutual fund, if you call me, an investment person, at 1 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, and you say, hey, Terry, I'd like to buy that fund. Even if I buy it within an hour, you don't actually get the fund until really the market closes at 4 o'clock and you see it in your account that night or the next morning. But with an ETF, when you click the buy button, you instantly own whatever it is you want to invest. So think about it. If you had the choice between getting a pizza right now or waiting 7 hours for that same pizza, what would you choose? Well, I'd probably choose the pizza right now. And oh, by the way, the ETF pizza, it costs less. And oh, by the way, the ETF pizza is more tax efficient. And oh, by the way, it's more broad and more specialized. Well, what does that mean? That's a contradiction. That's like the Starburst commercial where they're hard but juicy. Well, ETFs have all the same things that mutual funds have, but then lots of other flavors that really you can't get anywhere else. So as an example, on the next slide, I put ETFs are cool. You can do alternative energy sources like electricity, hydrogen power, you name it, it's in an ETF. You can invest in outer space, in artificial intelligence, in innovation funds that buy companies that 3D print homes and organs and all sorts of things. It's pretty crazy out there. So just again, to introduce the concept of ETFs, there's talk that someday these will start to take over 401ks and other types of investments will also push out mutual funds, not because mutual funds are bad, but because they're really where the market and the industry started. And these new types of technology and investment types have just transformed and become a little bit more advantageous over time. So again, they both look the same, they function a little bit differently. Maybe it's time to think about ETFs and see if something like that might be good for you. So Carmen asked the question, how long have ETFs been out? Honestly, I don't know how long ETFs have been out. It's funny, we work with a lot of military folks or federal employees, and what I'll hear sometime is, oh, that TSP, they just came out with that Roth or they just came out with that fund. But if you actually look at it, it was, further along than you would have thought. It's just nobody knew. So I'll check into that after this presentation. Not exactly sure when ETFs came out, but first it was mutual funds, then it was the index funds. Now ETFs are starting to become a bigger conversation piece. And then there's something else called a CIT. Don't worry, that's not coming for a while, but eventually you'll hear about that too. So thank you for the question. One last thing to say about ETFs. Again, I said there are lots of cool ones out there. This specific one is called ARK, the Innovation Technology ETF. This is not a commercial to go buy it. I'm just saying that last year it earned 153% return, which you could get in some other places, but that's not too shabby. And it also had a 44% average return the last 5 years. So again, if you're a person who wants a higher level of risk, ETFs could help you do that because there's lots of other ones that are more strategic or more focused in things that may give you more risk and then also more returns. Now, I'll quickly touch on some investment topics, and I believe my last slide here will be 401k, and then I'll pass it back to Kennah. With investing, there are so many things to talk about. I won't bore you tonight. We're going to do a full 45-minute presentation on investing, and I'm going to help you dissect any investment. We're going to go through it line by line. We're going to point at the things that you should know about. And then from there on, if you can remember even 5 things that I show you, maybe 3, you'll impress a lot of friends at the dinner party. So when it comes to investing in your strategy, most important is your asset allocation. That is, simply put, the amount of safe money and risky money in your portfolio. If you have a long time until retirement, you should have a good amount of risky money, and that would be stocks. If you are someone who's close to retiring, maybe more of the money should be safe. So asset allocation is how much risky and how much safe money you have in your portfolio. Thank you, Heidi. She pulled an Investopedia article, and it says the first ETF launch was in 1989. So that's what I mean. Most people haven't heard about ETFs the last 10 years, but they've been walking this earth for 30 years. That's insane. But that's how long it takes for information to come out, to spread, for people to get comfortable, and then to latch onto that change. So thank you very much, Heidi. Your time at the Washington Post, I'm sure, served you well in being able to quickly find sources and put it all together. So here's part 2. Investing, your expense ratio is basically the fee you're paying for your money to be invested. Once upon a time, fees were pretty high. Nowadays, you can get fees close to 0. So that's a quick thing that I do with almost every client. If they don't know what the fees are in their investments, we'll investigate and find out what that looks like. Section or sector preferences. Some people like healthcare, real estate, things of that nature. We can put little sleeves in portfolios to make them more custom. Funds that are sector specific or fund specific could be investments that are just in Latin America or overseas, or just companies that have high dividends. Morningstar is the free tool that everyone can use to learn almost anything about a mutual fund or investment. And then lastly, if you currently have a 401k, check into it to see if there's auto rebalancing or auto escalation. Auto rebalancing basically sells funds that have made too much money and reinvests into the ones that haven't made enough money, and it helps you rebalance your portfolio so you will sell high and then buy low, which is the key to making money in your investments. Auto escalation is where your contribution percentage goes up every year. So our son, I mentioned, is just one. We put a decent amount of money into his college fund, but every year that money we put in goes up and up and up and up. If we stay on that trajectory, we might just scrape by with enough to get him through college. We'll see, because we know college is super expensive. Hopefully he gets a full ride scholarship. That's what I'm holding out for. His mom's same height as me. We'll see how that turns out, but hopefully he's 6'3" and a great athlete and smart. Books are good too. So here's my big finish, and apologies for the shininess. As I mentioned, this little guy's running all over the office. If Warren was here, he could scare him into one place, but Warren's on his way to a wedding, so he's running wild over here. 401k. I love 401ks. Here's what I don't love. Many people are fortunate enough where they can contribute the maximum to their 401k. Nowadays, that's $20,000 or more. So here's the dirty secret. If you put $20,000 into your 401k, you save money in taxes, but this year you probably have $6,000 of future tax you have to pay. Now, this is why this gets bad. The further you are from retirement, that $6,000 is growing at 8 or 10%. So not only is your investment compounding, but your tax liability is compounding for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So what are the biggest problems that I see with clients that I work with? It's not that they don't have enough money, it's that they have too much tax that they owe in retirement. I would suggest it may not be the best idea to let a tax bomb build for 1, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So especially if you're close, if you've started your career and you've got a while to go into retirement, you're going to want to think about some Roth. Even if you're getting close to retirement, you want to do conversions. I talked to a client today, and she wants to do conversions. The bad news is the closer you get to 65, the harder it gets. So if you've ever thought that it might make sense to consider Roth conversions, which is just taking pre-tax money, changing it over to Roth, which is tax-free, I would suggest don't kick the can too much longer. At least have a conversation because unfortunately, Medicare, Social Security, required distributions, all these things work against you when it comes to Roth conversions. Early next year, we're going to have a course. We're going to talk probably just about Roth conversions and one other topic. But that was just a quick aside. You don't want that 401k to give you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of future tax liability. Last time I checked, our government had trillions of dollars of debt, not millions, not billions, but trillions. I'm not a betting person, but I would have to think that perhaps taxes might go up. So a question was, can you take money out of your 401k and put it into a Roth? Sometimes you can. If you rolled money into your 401k, you can often roll it back out into a traditional IRA and then convert it to a Roth IRA. At your employer, sometimes you have the ability to convert from pre-tax to Roth while you still work there. I believe the Washington Post actually does let you do that. So not a bad time to think about Roth. If the market goes down, excellent time to think about Roth. I told Kennah I would talk quickly and not speak too much. I've definitely not lived up to that. So I'm going to stop here and pass it back to her. So I'm going to pause it here on her slide. I will tag in and then she'll be back to talk about some protection strategies.
All right, we'll switch gears here, although not as exciting, but equally as important. We'll talk about protection strategies. We'll talk about life insurance, medical insurance, long-term care, and then we'll touch on home, auto, and umbrella insurance. So to start off with life insurance, a lot of people often ask, what is life insurance? I think this is probably the most common life insurance people have heard of, or they already have, whether it's through work or it's a life insurance that someone got through their parents and had for years and years. Life insurance truly is just protecting your loved ones. So it's getting insurance on yourself as a person to protect the people that you care about and that you love from any hardship that they may incur if something were to happen to you prematurely or at the end of your life. In most cases, it's usually tax-free income. So a lot of people like having life insurance policies because if they want to give their children, their grandchildren, or a loved one a big lump sum of money, they can pass that money off or tax-free when they pass away, and their significant others don't have to worry about paying taxes on that money long term. Also, it's a contract initially between you and the insurance company. So the insurance company takes the risk on if you would die prematurely, or whenever you do die, if you're still holding that policy, they do have to pay it out tax-free to your beneficiaries. A lot of times people ask, why do I need life insurance? Initially, it's usually to protect loss of income. So early on in people's career, usually they'll want to protect their mortgage. They'll want to protect potentially paying for education for their children long term. If something were to happen to them or their significant other, they wouldn't want their spouse to have to deal with the hardship of covering the mortgage by themselves or paying for college on their own. But the big thing is people will typically get life insurance to protect their salary over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. That would be a loss to them if their spouse wasn't there to obviously have the salary be in place of that life insurance. So it's very, very important to think about, especially in the earlier years, thinking about what type of policy to get, when it makes sense to get it, how it will affect your family, and how to plan for it. So we'll get into the different types. The last thing is just leaving a legacy. A lot of times people will use life insurance strategies to leave a legacy for their family and to be able to pass on a big sum of money that's tax-free in most cases to the people they care about. And in some situations, there are ways that you can plan for long-term care with a life insurance strategy and policy. There's new policies out there, and I'll touch on that in a second. Temporary versus permanent coverage. There's two main types of life insurance. Typically, most people have heard of term and they've heard of whole life. Whole life has been around for a very, very long time. It's a permanent type of policy. Term has also been around for a very long time, but they function very, very differently. Long story short, term life insurance provides a benefit for a specific number of years. Most people will get a policy for 20 years or 30 years, and they'll get a big lump sum amount, whether it's 500,000, a million, or 2 million, and it'll protect them through those higher income needs. So that's having a bigger mortgage, that's having the children still being at home, having to pay for their expenses, having to pay for education. It'll cover those bigger years where the need for having a greater amount of insurance is there. And usually when it comes to term, once you get the policy and you get the price, it's usually pretty affordable and pretty inexpensive. I think I got a term policy for 30 years on myself. And at the age that I was at, I think it was around $30 or $35. Which is very affordable. So in most cases, a lot of people will want to get this type of policy early on. And this is the policy that they'll get first because it's typically affordable in their situation. Term is very, very simple. There's no bells and whistles. It doesn't have a lot of extra added benefits. It's just strictly coverage that's usually in a bigger lump sum that pays out tax-free to their loved one if something were to happen. So it initially offers that bigger amount of protection for a period of time. Whole life or permanent coverage is really designed to stay in force, like the graph says, for pretty much either most of someone's life or for a longer part of their life. It has cash value components. So in most cases, when you get a permanent policy, the day that you get it is the amount that you buy it for is usually stays the same. And the amount that they call it is the premium. The premium typically stays the same and it doesn't increase or decrease unless you want to make adjustments to the policy. When it comes to permanent, it has cash value that accumulates long term. So this is a good strategy to use if you want to take some additional cash out in retirement. If you want to use it for different strategies or different purchases, you can use cash value in some permanent policies. And in some cases, they can grow based on the market. So some of the cases you can actually invest a portion of your premium into the market and have it grow long term. And you can use those dollars later on in life if you'd like to. Those are just a little bit of the differences between temporary and permanent. It really depends on your situation and what you're looking for, but those are the main differences when it comes to thinking about, do I want a temporary policy or do I want a permanent policy, or do I want to do both, but just strategize how much of each coverage I want to have. There are many different riders when it comes to life insurance. I will only touch on probably the top three that I think are probably the most common. A rider is just something you can attach to a policy that's an added benefit. So number one, the first one I think is the most popular is waiver of premium. If somebody becomes disabled and they have that type of scenario that happens to them, they can typically let the insurance company know and the premium will be waived for them and they don't have to pay their premium moving forward because they're disabled, now they can't work, they don't have employment, so they aren't able to pay for their premium. So instead of losing out on your coverage, the insurance company has this ability to let them know and they give you a waiver of premium and then they pay the coverage for you so you don't lose out on your coverage. Child rider is the second one. We actually just put a child rider on my policy for my son, Everett, who's almost 1.5. It allows them to have some coverage and it ultimately just guarantees their insurability so that if something happens to them medically wise down the road, they're insured to some degree, to some capacity, and they're able to have some type of life insurance long term. Chronic illness rider, which is considered a long-term care rider. I touched on that just briefly. It's if something happens to you and you have a chronic illness, there are ways that you can tap into a permanent policy, which is called a hybrid life insurance policy, and use some of the benefit, so some of the death benefit of the policy to pay some long-term care expenses. I won't go into too much of detail, but it is a really good strategy for people who aren't looking to purchase a long-term care insurance policy, but they're looking to buy something that allows them to, I guess, offset the need if they did have a long-term care or chronic illness situation. So there are many, many different types of riders out there, but I think these are probably the three popular that most people hear about or they're interested in pursuing when it comes to their situation. So if you have a permanent policy right now that you've had for years, or if you're looking into getting a permanent policy, these are some of the different riders that you could attach to it if it's of interest to you in your situation. A lot of times people will ask, when is the best time to get each policy? And it really just depends on your specific situation. There's no cookie cutter answer. There's no one answer for one family or one size fits all. It's really stage of life. And it comes down to, do you have kids? Are you married? Are you taking care of a parent or a loved one? What is your situation and who are you wanting to protect? And that will really help us or help you understand what you're looking to do and what type of policy to acquire. When it comes to age and health, those kind of coincide with each other. A lot of times when it comes to getting health or to getting life insurance, you have to take underwriting. So you have to go under underwriting where you have to answer health questions, you have to get a health screening done, and in some cases it can be strict, and they'll take a look at your medical records and they'll ask you questions about different things in your past with your medical situation, and that can depend on whether you're approved or whether your premium goes up or goes down, or whether they add additional charges to the life insurance that they may offer you. So when it comes to getting a type of policy, we typically recommend get something if you're young and you don't have a lot of someone to really that's counting on your income. You can get a small policy, or you can get something just to guarantee your insurability. But long term, as you get older, it can get harder to get health insurance depending on your situation medically. And also, it gets more expensive as the years go on. So as you get older, the price goes up. So it just kind of comes down to outweighing the different benefits and options that you have, and then seeing what would make sense for you long term as far as which policy to get. We'll touch on medical insurance. I think this is a really important statistic. I don't know if any of you have ever heard this before, but lack of healthcare is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the US, which is crazy to me. But it's actually not surprising to me because I just had a baby a year and a half ago. I realized how much health insurance is helpful and how much health costs are, because it's not cheap to have a baby. And if you don't have health insurance and you don't have protection to help pay for that or help offset some of those costs, it can definitely damage your situation a lot. The second is 66.5% of bankruptcies in the US are due to medical issues that can't be paid. So whether they can't be paid because they don't have enough money, or due to loss of employment, so they just go bankrupt because they ultimately can't pay those bills. So that's why I think medical insurance is probably one of the most important types of protection strategies. Most people have medical insurance that's offered to them through most employers. If you're self-employed, that's a different situation. You have to go out to the marketplace and look for the best one for you. And sometimes that can be more expensive because a portion of it may not be subsidized, obviously, by the employer. You may have to take over the whole amount. But ultimately, I think that medical insurance is one of those things that most people, if not everyone, should consider getting. And it's just something that really can affect you negatively and affect your situation negatively if you don't take it seriously. Key takeaways: utilize the employer benefits you have if it's an option. Try to get some understanding on what type of policy you have. There's various different kinds. There's PPO, there's HMO, people have TRICARE for life. There's all sorts of policies out there, and they all work a little bit differently. So your employer may offer you a high deductible plan. They could offer you a low deductible plan. In my situation, I had a high deductible plan, and I had an HSA, which is a health savings account. So I was able to put money towards that and then use it to pay for my medical expenses when I had medical expenses I needed to pay. I won't get into too much of detail on that because I could talk about that for a long time. But if you do have access to an HSA or an FSA, I would look into that a little bit more and see if it made sense for you and your family. One thing that I'll touch on: high deductible plan versus low deductible plan, they vary. So people who have high deductible plans typically have lower monthly premiums, and people who usually have low deductible plans usually have higher monthly premiums. So it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. They just function a little bit differently. So you want to take a look at your situation and see what would make sense for you. Do you go to the doctor often? Do you do routine checkups? Are you consistently going to see the doctor? If you are, a high deductible plan may not make sense because you will be paying out of pocket to reach that deductible, every time you go visit the doctor. So just think about those different variations of how your life or how your medical insurance works, and it'll help you make a decision on which ones to choose if you have that ability, and moving forward, how to plan for that when that happens. I'll touch on long-term care. This has actually been, I think, probably more of a hot topic in the last 10 years than ever before. Long-term care, ultimately, at the end of the day, it really protects your assets. It covers long-term care, chronic illnesses, disability that go on for, it could go on for a year, it could go on for 6 months, or it could be a situation where you need hospital care 24/7 for 15 to 20 years. No one knows when they're going to have it. No one knows if they will have a long-term care scenario. So it's one of those things where it's hard for people to stomach and plan for, because you're kind of gambling, thinking, I don't know if I'm going to have a long-term care scenario. Do I want to pay for something to protect me in that way? Or do I want to take the risk and pay for it myself? In most cases, long-term care insurance can be expensive. Health underwriting, like I talked about with life insurance, is much more strict than it is with long-term care than it is with life insurance. They will look at your parents' history. They will go back years and years on your medical experience. I've seen some crazy situations where people have been denied before because their father, their mother had a certain medical history. So it can be very strict, which is why most people who are interested in getting long-term care, they'll probably try to get it earlier than later, because it gets harder and harder to get approved. Not impossible, but it just can be difficult. Policies can be complex, or they can be simple. You can get a long-term care policy that's very simple, that covers a basic need for 3 years for a certain amount of money per year, that doesn't have any bells and whistles. Or you can get a policy that's very complex, that has inflation riders and all these different protection strategies on them. There's many different ways you can prepare and plan if you utilize a long-term care insurance policy, but you'll just want to understand how it works and what makes sense for you and your family if you're deciding to do so. The last thing on long-term care that I'll touch on, you really can plan for long-term care in 3 major ways. And this is what I usually tell people when they ask, what do people do when it comes to long-term care? What are the options? The first one is self-insuring. You can pay out of pocket. You can pretty much just take the risk and say, hey, I don't know if something's going to happen to me. And if something doesn't, great. If something does, I will take the risk and use some of my assets to pay for any expenses that come. The second one is family and friends. You can have your parent, you can have a family or a friend or somebody help take care of you in that situation, and plan to utilize family and friends in that way, where you can minimize the cost of having to be in a facility and having a professional take care of you. The third way is to ultimately get a long-term care insurance policy or a hybrid life insurance policy that I talked about a couple slides back. But at the end of the day, those are the main 3 ways that long-term care is taken care of. And it's really up to you to decide how you want to take care of it for yourself. And there's no perfect answer. It just has to make sense for your family. But it is expensive. It is something that people are becoming more concerned about. And it is something to think about and factor in as you start to plan for retirement and think about the assets that you have long-term down the road. I'm going to grab Terry. He's going to finish us off with talking about estate planning, talking about taxes, and how that fits in your overall financial plan. So 1 second.
All right. And then there was one last section. Thank you all so much again for sticking with us. We're going to knock out this last section, and hopefully we have at least a minute or 2 for questions. There's a question on here, and it says, can you talk about when in your life is the right time to transfer away from life insurance and rely upon investments? Did Kennah cover that during her time? So if anyone can let me know, it was the Walters family, I think, asked that question. And if I see it wasn't covered, I'll make sure that I touch on that. But in the meantime, okay, thank you. So is there a time of your life where you want to go away from life insurance and rely on your investments? It depends. Let's say that a person passes away when it's a down stock market. That may not be a good thing, because now your family may have to sell shares at a discount, versus if you had life insurance, that could buy them 1, 2, 3 years until the market recovers, so they don't have to sell devalued shares. Further, if you're a conservative investor, you're unlikely to earn rates of return that would be better than if you just paid for life insurance and had a tax-free benefit at the end of the day. Further to that, if you leave investments to your children or beneficiaries, they're going to pay taxes. If you leave life insurance, it's tax-free. So it really comes down to, it depends. Interestingly enough, some of the wealthiest people that I've ever heard of Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, they own a ton of permanent life insurance. I think those guys are probably at least somewhat smart. So there's probably some good reasons to have perhaps some permanent life insurance in the grand scheme of your overall financial strategy. So when to transition from life insurance to investments, I guess I would say the short answer is maybe never, but it really truly depends on the level of risk you're comfortable with and if you would want something like a sure thing in your overall strategy. So thank you for that question. I'll touch on these pretty quickly because I just gave a bunch of screenshots that I'm going to make some quick comments on. Very welcome. So here's what I would say about home, auto, and umbrella policies. First off, I'd say don't be loyal. If you've had Geico or USAA or State Farm, hey, they have great commercials, but I would shop your policy every few years to see if you can save money. When it comes to homeowners insurance, if you refinance a home, please look for a different homeowners insurance policy. I've seen people save hundreds of dollars a month just by having a phone call and switching to a different company. So, homeowners auto insurance, I'd say just be on the lookout for savings. Liability coverage, if a really bad accident happens, it could wipe out your assets. So, especially as your assets grow, you may want to think about an umbrella policy, also known as an excess liability policy. If Terry slips off the road, hits a phone pole, and it falls on a school bus and causes $2 million of damage, my umbrella pays the $2 million. It doesn't come out of my assets. So, that would be a good reason to have an umbrella policy. I'll finish the presentation by talking about government benefits. I know there's lots of ways to say government, so I got this from Google, of course, because that's where all the fun things live. Social Security. I sometimes spend 45 minutes talking about Social Security. I'll summarize it in just a few slides with some quick things. So what is it? It is designed to help you have a decent retirement. Anyone who works in the US, pays into Social Security, is a citizen, and has 10 years of full-time work is covered. You don't necessarily need 10 years of full-time work, but you need 40 quarters of eligible earnings. You can do that over 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. The easiest way is 10 years of full-time employment. You'll be vested when it comes to Social Security. Why is it important? The majority of retirees rely on Social Security for the majority of their support. Again, the majority of retirees rely on Social Security for the majority of their support. When should you have it? Well, that depends. I'll tell you that in just a second. I wanted to point out, if you haven't looked at your Social Security statement in a while, you should look it up. They've completely changed the whole thing. One cool to look at, is you can take a quick look at how much money you've paid in taxes over your lifetime. It's a little depressing, I'll admit, but take a look and let's see if we can figure out who's paid the most. Just kidding. But there's literally a line item that shows you over your lifetime what you've put into Social Security. That's one reason why it's not going to go away. We're all going to get something because we're all putting money into it. But again, when should you take your Social Security? The earliest is 62, the latest is 70. At 66 through 67, that's called FRA, full retirement age, where you get 100% of your benefit. So this is what it comes down to. If you want 100% of what's yours, you wait to 66 or 67. If you're willing to take a big cut, take it at 62. If you want to get as much as possible, wait until 70. The longer you live, the bigger the impact. So think about your situation. Do you want $1,500 a month in retirement? Do you want $2,500 or do you want $3,500? It's up to you. And oh, by the way, this choice counts multiple times. If you have a spouse who relies on your earnings history to claim their spousal benefit, your choice impacts them. If you get hit by the fruit truck and they no longer have your benefit and you chose it at 62, you just lock them into the worst possible scenario. You're gone, which is terrible, and now they have the lowest amount of Social Security to rely on. So you really want to think about it. Social Security is one of the most important decisions that becomes irrevocable. If you have the courage, I'd ask some people who are on Social Security, hey, how do you feel about the decision you made? And often what I've heard is people were not happy with their choice. They would have done it differently if they had a second chance. Does the Social Security amount change as you age? Yes, it does. It's indexed with your earnings. It's indexed with cost of living. And even if you're retired and you get a part-time job, that can actually adjust your Social Security benefit. So your Social Security changes all the time. So great question. If you go pull your statement, you will see a personalized chart of your projected Social Security benefit amounts at every single year. It even has differences in months. It won't show you on the statement, but every month you wait counts. So once again, this is an important decision. You want $2,000 a month or $3,700? Your choice. What about payback time for the age difference? Generally speaking, if you live to the early 80s, waiting to claim your Social Security was a good decision. If you think you're not going to live a very long retirement, maybe it makes sense to take your Social Security early. Again, most people I talk to say they wish they would have waited. What about surviving spouse benefits? Yes, if you're a surviving spouse, you can start taking those benefits age 60. Then you can flip over to your own benefit anywhere between 62 and 70. So you have that option, and there's no penalty if you start taking it at 60. That doesn't impact your benefit. You are more than entitled to take that survivor benefit at 60, flip to yours anywhere between 62 and 70. So Social Security is wide and deep. We're going to do a 45-minute presentation on just this and some of the strategies that no longer exist. But to put it short, you have lots of choices. It's the most important decision for most retirees. I would say definitely take some time, think about it, and just remember your decision counts not once, not twice, at least 3 times if there's other people that rely on you. Pull your statement, you'll see your disability benefits, your survivor benefits for your family. You'll see some funny disclosures that tell you they look at 35 years of earnings. Any year you didn't have earnings counts as a 0, which drags down your benefit. There's a cost of living adjustment for Social Security. Unfortunately, they don't base it off of the expenses or chain price index that applies to elderly people. They don't use that for some reason. So things like healthcare aren't accurately represented. They also do substitutions where they say, oh, you don't need steak, just have chicken. So while there is cost of living adjustments, just know your Social Security benefit will not keep up with Starbucks. So again, those egg bites might have to go bye-bye. Or that's why we save and invest so we can have what we want in retirement. There's a funny thing, I won't talk about this slide, but on the old Social Security benefit statement, there was this big section that said Social Security is currently not on track to have enough money to pay us full benefits. They took that out completely. It's no longer there. But if you click on that little link, the ssa.gov/there-for-me, this cute thing pops up that talks about times in history where there was trillions of dollars of debt. And, we worked our way out of it and we were somehow still able to pay money to people. And then if you go to the bottom, it does say, by the way, in 2034, we don't have enough money. We can only give about 80% of the promised benefits. So if you haven't seen a statement, I'd encourage you to take a look. Very, very funny. They deliberately got rid of the part that says we're running out of money. And now you have to take a hyperlink to it and then scroll down in order to find it. But at least, hey, they made the chart pretty. So looks good, looks exciting. So just wanted to point that out if you haven't seen a statement in a while. Last thing on the Social Security statement is it mentions Medicare. Here's what I want you to know about Medicare. Medicare is not free. So for most of us at age 65, that's when you should sign up for at least Medicare Part A. You don't need Part B until you're no longer working. If you delay taking Part B, you can have a lifetime penalty. So don't delay or else you'll pay more forever. But again, Medicare is supposed to replace the coverage you had when you were working, but it's not free. So just recently, from 2021 to 2022, they announced a 14% price hike. That's a big deal. So it's going up by 14%. So now, and they've even cited the reasons why, which doesn't matter, we're all paying more. But what most people don't know, the price you pay for Medicare is based off of your taxable income. So you could pay, if you're married or single, anywhere from $170 a month to $578 per person. Let me say that again. Medicare is based off your income. You can pay from $170 per person to $578 per month per person. It's based off your income. So if you're doing Roth conversions, if you're taking out taxable money, if you're doing things like taking money out of an investment to pay for a home or pay for something for someone else, that could really hurt your Medicare. So that's why I said if you're ever going to do Roth conversions, don't wait, because this thing is called IRMA, income related monthly adjustments. It will kick up your Medicare cost, and it's not fun. You get the same coverage as everyone else. Why pay 4 times as much for it just because someone thinks you can afford to? The brackets are not that high. And if you go over by $1, you get to pay that increased amount for a whole year and then hope you go back down below $1 for the next year. So just wanted to put that out there. Again, Medicare is not free. It's deducted from your Social Security, costs anywhere from $170 a person to close to $580. So that is pretty much all that I had. The last thing I put was D&T, death and taxes. Unfortunately, it's one of the things in life that we can't really get around. What I would say about it is we're all going to check out at some point. Our responsibility as planners is to help uh, pretend you'll live forever, pretend something happens tomorrow, and make sure you're okay everywhere in between. There's lots of simple tools to protect your family, from life insurance to having a will, to having beneficiaries on your bank account, perhaps a trust, depending on your situation, having an appointed guardian for your minor children. We would just say have a plan, and if you have a plan, maybe update it, because I'm pretty sure I know some people who maybe that plan's 10 or 20 years old. Their kids no longer need to go live with Aunt Susan because they all have children or grandchildren of their own. So I would just say to everyone, when you're thinking about your situation, think about who's next. Who's the executor who's going to step in and take care of your estate and take care of your assets and the people you care about. So again, we have plenty of information on estate planning and tax planning, but just wanted to hit that very quickly to say we all will leave here someday. While we're living, we get the privilege to make some plans, hopefully, so that we'll be remembered in the light we'd like to and leave people in the situation that we would like for them. So that's all of our presentation. There's a couple questions. So if I have health insurance when I retire, do I still need Medicare? If you have qualifying coverage, you don't necessarily have to get Medicare. But here's the thing, if you go and get Medicare later because you didn't have qualifying coverage, they're going to penalize you. Generally speaking, you have a short time window, around 6 months, 8 months, to elect Medicare Part B and not pay a penalty. So some people don't have Medicare, but like 97% of people do. So you want to really ask some questions. Talk to the Medicare or Social Security Administration close to retirement just to double check. What if you don't draw Social Security until after 65? Does Medicare bill you? No, it doesn't. Medicare Part A is free. You can take that at 65. You don't have to claim Medicare Part B until you retire fully, and you have 8 months to elect Medicare Part B, and you still won't have any penalty. So great question. The ball is completely in your court. One thing to know, if you sign up for Medicare, you can no longer contribute to a health savings account. So that's the downside. But otherwise, not bad to have extra coverage, especially if it's free. On the screen, you see how to get in touch with us. As I said earlier, I talk too long, so sorry about that. But if you haven't seen our website, it's innovativewealthbuilding.com. You can find us on Facebook at Team IWB. Amazing friends and family. We have like 800 people on there that follow us, which is incredible. We're on LinkedIn. We have phone, email, and of course, just come by the office in Southern Maryland. We'd love to see you. So that's our presentation for today. Sorry again for going too long. If there's any questions, just let me know. I'll stand by to answer questions, but we'll end it the same way we started. That's to say thank you to everyone who showed up tonight. This wouldn't be fun without you here. We would still do this and just talk to ourselves, but this makes us not feel crazy. So again, thank you for being here. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, have a great night. We appreciate you.